Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. We are going to give another minute or so to let the last few people join, and then we'll get started.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to go ahead. Welcome to the Learning Ally College Success Program webinar. By the way, I have low vision, the pros and cons of self-identifying having low vision. We are going to kick it off. I am Katie Otaggio. I work for Learning Ally on the College Success Program as the Engagement Operations Manager. I'm going to pass it off to my colleague Abigail, who's going to give you a little bit of info, a little kind of housekeeping tips, and then we'll go from there.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. I'm Abigail Shaw, the Mentor Coordinator for the College Success Program. We have several panelists who are going to be talking about specifically from the low vision standpoint, but I think a lot of these tips will apply to people of all different levels. We will hold off questions till probably the last 15 or 20 minutes. Post questions you have in the chat, and we will use the during Q&A to call on folks. If you're calling in, it will be *9 to raise your hand. On the PC, it's Alt-Y, and on a Mac, it's Option-Y. I'll probably repeat later on, but welcome, and I'm going to pass it off to Kristen.
Hi everybody, welcome to the webinar. I'm Kristen Waitaki, the Curriculum and Content Editor for the College Success Program, and I'll also be keeping time for the moderator. And without further ado, let's get started.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers, and then they will start digging in. So we have, joining us is Maureen Hayden. She is a College Success Program mentor and also is going to be our moderator today. Maureen has a BS in Marine Biology from the University of Rhode Island, an MS in Biology from Walla Walla University, and is currently pursuing a PhD in Marine Biology from Texas A&M. She was born with retinopathy of prematurity and has no vision in her right eye and is legally blind in her left eye. Also joining us is Brilynn Rakes. She is a CSP mentor as well. Brilynn grew up in the small town of Vasile, California, and found her passion for dance performance at the age of 8. For 14 years, Brilynn trained and performed in various dance styles, including classical ballet, contemporary, and jazz. She was honored to be the AT&T Spotlight Performer on ABC's Dancing with the Stars, as she performed alongside Emmy-nominated dancer and choreographer Derek Huff. Brilynn earned a BFA in dance from the ALE Fordham BFA program and a BA in Communications and Media Studies from Fordham University. She currently resides in Palo Alto, California, where she is interning with Vista Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired, in addition to pursuing a certificate in business administration from Foothill College. We also have Sam Vanderswag, another CSP mentor. Sam has a BA in Unique and Interdisciplinary Studies from the City University of New York. Although his major during college was applied psychology and neuroscience, he is currently pursuing a career in textile design. Sam's visual condition consists of albinism, nystagmus, and astigmatism. And last but not least, we have Emily Vasile, another CSP mentor. Emily is a faculty member of the Department of Blindness and Low Vision Studies at Salus University and the program coordinator of the National Leadership Consortium in Sensory Disabilities at Salus University as well. She is certified in elementary education and special education in the state of New Jersey, as well as a certified teacher of students with visual impairments in both New Jersey and Pennsylvania. She is also certified low vision therapist through the Academy for Certification of Vision Rehabilitation and Education Professionals, and her areas of expertise include low vision rehabilitation and education of students with visual impairments. Born with a cataract in her left eye and later on diagnosed with glaucoma, Emily never let her visual impairment define her ability to succeed. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Maureen, who's going to kick us off.
All right. Thank you so much, Katie. Good afternoon, everyone. So glad you could join us for this webinar. So I think first off, we're just going to start with some stories from our mentors. So first off, I was wondering if one of our mentors could maybe describe a time in college when you chose to disclose your visual impairment early, and how did you feel that this experience maybe helped or hindered you as a student?
Hi, everyone. I can answer that. So when I went to college, I was really excited. I was really excited to be there. I had just moved to New York City, and I had recently performed on television. And so I was really proud of my achievements. So right when I got to college during the dance program orientation, I decided to disclose to all of my classmates and all of the dance, specifically administrators. And in retrospect, I feel that I maybe shouldn't have done that because they didn't have time to see my skill. They didn't have time to witness what I could do for themselves. Of course, they could see what I could do on paper through my resume and through meeting me in person. But in this specific instance, I wish I would have waited till they could have seen me dance. I feel like in a lot of the arts, their administrators are critical, or we're all critical of ourselves in these arts. So I just think that I should have waited, because I feel like throughout my college experience at that dance school, they had a slightly different view of me. They kind of didn't expose me to certain opportunities, and which I totally could have done. But I also think they saw me a bit as a bit of a liability at times, because with the visual impairment, they didn't want me to get hurt. They didn't want me to fall on stage or harm anybody. But little did they know that I have many ways of, performing and dancing without getting hurt and with staying with everyone else. So I didn't prove to them what I was capable of. I disclosed it first, and it kind of colored their view of me. So most oftentimes it's better to disclose first, but you really do have to gauge the situation and think a little bit. And in my case, I should have maybe a month in, after they saw my talent and my skills, told them about it. So.
All right, thank you for that story, Brilynn. On the other hand, Sam, I think you have a story about maybe describing a time when you chose not to disclose your visual impairment, and how did that help or hinder you as a student during your time in college?
Yeah, so during college, I was usually pretty good at disclosing, but for some reason, I took a math course, and for all sorts of factors, including, pride, I decided not to, because I thought everything would be okay. I had notified the disability office about the course and, provided the letters and things, but I met the professor the first day of class, which is, not ideal given, you want to give the professor time to, to know him better. But I didn't do it, and I paid the consequences. I didn't do terribly well in the course because I didn't have a note taker. It was a very heavily note-taking class. He was writing on the whiteboard, and I thought it would be more, online based sort of type of curriculum, but it wasn't. And he also had a very thick French accent, so I wasn't able to adapt as far as listening to what he was saying. And in retrospect, I should have been more forthright with the professor, or also just maybe switch courses. I didn't do either of those, and I paid the consequence as far as my grade. But yeah.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to disclosure, it's all dependent on the situation and on your comfort level. But I mean, we do want to mention here that each person on this panel is different, and every person's situation is different. So in general, although it's, good to disclose early and highly recommended. We do realize that, there are exceptions, and, everyone is a little bit different. So while this webinar is informational, just keep in mind we all have our own experiences, and everyone's situation and comfort level with disclosure is different. So on to our next set of questions. So when evaluating whether and how to disclose your low vision, what are some factors you take into consideration? So when evaluating whether to disclose your low vision, let's start with academic situations. So Brilynn, I think you have a story about this.
Yeah, so I've learned that there are so many more pros to disclosing in an academic environment versus the cons. I've had many amazing experiences in college with writing the professor a really well-written email in advance, explaining your visual impairment, kind of giving them a heads up that, yes, you'll be getting an email from the Disability Resource Office, kind of outlining maybe a couple of the accommodations that you'll need, just so they hear from you. It really, you'll represent yourself well if you do this. And the professor will respect you and want to help you in any way that they can because you were taking the initiative. And there's going to be some professors that aren't going to do that. And if you don't click right away, and if they don't respond favorably to your email and it seems like it's not going to fit, just get out of that class immediately because it's not going to be the right fit for you. And also every disability resource office their main purpose is to help you. So lay everything out for them and be open with them, and they will, in a perfect world, I mean, I've had great experiences. They will help you in any way that they can, and that's only going to help you in your academic career. So in academics, you always want to disclose because there are so many resources at your disposal, and they're just there to help you. So, and when you get that bad professor, don't think it's your fault. I think that just realize that they just aren't the right professor for you, and switch classes, try to figure out something else. But the more you do it in advance, the more you can figure these things out, and then you can get into a good class in a timely manner and be successful.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing, Brilynn, is frequent and consistent communication, not only with your professors, but with student disability services as well. And even sometimes if you do get a professor who is being a little bit difficult, if for some reason changing a class isn't an option, remember, like Brilynn said, student disability services is there to help you. And odds are they've probably worked with this particular professor before. They're probably well aware of the situation, and they can help you navigate those kinds of circumstances should they arise. So transitioning from academics, I know a lot of us in undergrad sometimes have opportunities to enter into the professional world, whether it be working an on-campus job or working as an undergraduate research assistant. So I was wondering, Emily, if you had some advice on when to disclose your vision as far as professional situations.
Sure. So it's one of those things I think that can be a little tricky. I think the first thing you need to feel out your employer. When my first job, fresh out of graduate school, I chose to disclose. And right away, I felt like it put kind of a negative lens on me as a professional, because I felt that my employer was then questioning whether or not I was capable of doing my job, because I needed support when I was supposed to be supporting a student. I was a TBI. And so I think right off the bat, it kind of set me up to have kind of a sour relationship with the district that I was working with. However, in my position that I'm in now, I did disclose from the beginning but I'm also working in a department of blindness and low vision studies. So I think the fact that they already had that background knowledge and they already knew, I think, a lot of the tools and the equipment and the software that I needed, approached it from a much more understanding and supportive lens than the district, who really did not know anything about educating students with visual impairments. So I think from a professional standpoint, whatever job you end up going into, I think sit with yourself for a little bit and ask yourself, you know, am I capable of doing this job without my Zoom text, without extended time, you know, if it's assignment, you know, paper writing or something like that. Like, really ask yourself, what are the tasks that I'm being asked to perform, and do I need accommodations in order to do that successfully? If the answer is no, then maybe feel it out for a little bit. Maybe work there for your 90-day period, you know, and at your 90-day evaluation, maybe then choose to disclose with your supervisor. Once you've already built that relationship, and they know you and you know them, you could choose to disclose then. So it's really kind of a touch and go thing, I think, from my perspective. Having disclosed both times and one not working out so well, it was, you know, it was a lesson learned, but it didn't keep me from disclosing, because I knew that I needed certain software and materials in order to be successful at my job.
Right, right. Okay. And so I think kind of transitioning from that then, like when we're at our jobs, when we're at school, even when we're at college, there, hopefully we aren't just doing academics, we're participating in when we can do face-to-face club socials and sports again, hopefully soon. What advice do you have on disclosing your vision or when not to disclose in social settings, Emily?
It's been interesting for me in social settings. Sometimes it's obvious because I do use a mobility cane. I only started within the last 5 years, but I also drive. So it's been a little complicated sometimes with friends who I already know and have a relationship with. It's a little bit easier. But back when I was still dating, that was a little tricky to navigate. And because I did a lot of dating online, so I thought, okay, I'm not going to disclose right away. I would rather have somebody read my profile and get to know me and talk to me. But in some of my pictures, I don't know if you can tell now, but not only do I have 2 different colored eyes, but my left eye tends to drift a lot. So when you look at me, sometimes you can see that there is something visibly different. So I've had people say things like, "What's up with your eyes?" Obviously not a kind way to ask about a visible difference. And then in that case, I did explain why my eyes look different than typical eyes do. But I think that's also kind of a preference about, you know, when to disclose with your friends versus strangers versus, I guess, anybody. But I've always kind of approached it as, even when I do disclose, let me use this as a moment to, coming from the assistant professor, let me use this as a teachable moment with my friends or my strangers, to let them know about people with low vision, that people with low vision may not consider themselves blind, you know, and really kind of give them a little bit of education of, yes, I do use a cane, but I can also still drive legally. I passed the driver's test just like you did. So it's interesting. I don't know if Brilynn or Sam have any, or Maureen have any other thoughts you guys want to add, but that's been my experience with disclosing.
Brilynn or Sam, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very helpful to be, it's always tricky because, you know, if you're you want to connect immediately, right? The fact that you bring up, you know, you're visually impaired, right, is can either bring too much attention to it. But I think like the moments that I tend to disclose is tends to be more in the less ideal situation. Sometimes it's like, you know, I'm looking for them. Like for example, during college orientation, right? You met someone, right, during maybe the commencements, right? And you sat next to each other, and then like you don't really have the time to disclose them, but like when you in orientation, you want to connect with a group, right? It's very hard to scan the room, and or when you want to meet someone at the bar, yeah, you you can either get there first, or you know, you can tell them when you had, you know, time struggling to find them. Oftentimes, like, you know, when I'm Mr. Rich, I say, you know, call my name. You know, that's a good way of for me to find you immediately. But one thing that doesn't help is like over here. That doesn't that does nothing, because that's no indication of if they're calling you or not, or
friends saying I'm parked outside, and you're like,
yeah.
Which one is your car? They're all gray.
Yeah.
I find it always funny because I'm completely colorblind. So someone will be like, "Oh, the blue one. Oh, you know, the orange one." And I'm like, I have no idea. And sometimes, like a couple weeks ago, you know, with all the masks, my dentist wanted to give me a new mask, and she was like, "Oh, the blue one there." So I like reached in a big drawer of masks, and I pulled out the wrong color, and it turned out to be like this really fancy like surgical mask. She did not intend to give me that mask, but I just didn't. I didn't feel like explaining my visual impairment, so I just took the mask. And like sometimes you just gotta let it like slide off your back if something awkward comes up, and you don't feel like talking about it. Just realize that it doesn't really matter. Like she's not sitting at home being like, oh, that girl like took the wrong color. Like, did she know? I don't know. You know, it's just little things happen all the time, and you kind of get a thick skin, and you realize that, you know, you can disclose, or you can just kind of let it go and move on if situation is uncomfortable.
The number of times I've walked into wet floor signs is kind of ridiculous at this point.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
All right. It's okay. The poor janitors know at this point. So what are some ways you've made your visual impairment easier for people without that experience to kind of understand kind of what does your world look like?
I can go first.
Who wants to start?
Sure, I'll go. So like I said, I'm colorblind, so I tell people that I see in grayscale what they would know as grayscale, so no color, and I try to give them a context of what I see and just try to explain it. I have my little punchlines that I use over and over to help explain that I've developed over the years that are really good. And then I always end with the fact that I'm really independent and I was born with this genetic condition. And for me, I don't want anybody feeling bad for me or being like, oh, I do not like that. So I just really try to accentuate the point that I'm very independent. I'm like perfectly happy, and this is just part of who I am.
I guess I'll go
Sam,
next.
What about you?
So I like to be, when people like to ask me what it's like to be visually impaired, right? I like to say more than just, it's vision loss. I like to point to, artwork, ones that are abstract, and say that, hey, I can see this type of detail from 10 feet away. Or there's also some great online resources that can help, video resources that can help illustrate or simulate what it is to have, different types of visual conditions, such as, glaucoma, RP. At Perkins School for the Blind has great videos. Also, there's something called simulator.cnow.org, which, is a pretty cool one, because it's not only a video, but you can also use your camera to, show, how someone would see, their current environment. Yeah, but I like to, say that it's more than just not, seeing a certain amount. It's more, layered, I guess.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Emily?
I've actually, in listening to both Brilynn and Sam, I feel like I've used both of, I relate to both of those. I actually have used Sam with like describing paintings to people. I always say, like, if I cover my right eye, which is my better eye, everything looks like a Monet painting to me.
Oh, that's
like
great.
It's all like just like pixelated, and George Seurat, which is like Sunday in the Park with George, what's all like pointillism.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So I always think it's really cool because I'm really into art. So I was like, oh, this is what it looks like. And I've always thought, I'm like, wouldn't it be cool if I like covered my right eye and then like tried to paint something with the vision in my left eye? And like, maybe that could really give people like an exact picture. I'm like, look, I just painted this for you. This is what I saw. But yeah, no, I definitely relate with the art and the painting stuff as well. In my field and in graduate school, we actually have like simulators, which are goggles that have different different circles in them, so you can like make them dark, make them light, kind of fog them over. So that helps with like experiencing like field of view or less like central vision or things like that. But what I used to do in high school is, and what I did actually early in college was, before I even knew that those goggles existed, I made my own simulators for like students or friends, or I think I did for my mom at one point. And I took a pair of glasses, like really high prescription reading glasses from the dollar store, and I painted the lens with clear nail polish. And like Vaseline, and I was like, this is what I see out of my left eye. And she was like, oh, okay. So
yeah, that's cool.
It's like, you got to be creative, I think, sometimes in describing it to people, but like if you can give them a hands-on experience, I've always found that to be really helpful.
Definitely.
Because if people don't know Seurat and Monet, that's going to mean nothing to them.
Right.
Yeah. And I think more than anything, over time, we can try to describe as much as we want, but I think Brilynn brought something up really important at the beginning of this session is, once people see your abilities, I think my friends, like, what I see doesn't matter to them as much as like my ability to navigate. And like it gets to the point where they don't even remember that I don't see well, and we go to like restaurants with a billboard menu, and I'm like, can you help me read it, please?
I'm always in search of the paper menu. Like, give me that paper menu everywhere. Like, where is it? I hate those menus as well.
Yeah. So what advice would you all give about discussing low vision with a professor? Emily, I think you had a good story about this.
Yeah. So I mean, being in an education environment as a student, but now also in it as an assistant professor, I've been able to participate in both sides, and I see both sides. And I always say, I mean, I know Brilynn talked about this a little earlier on in our webinar, but whenever you can, I think it's better to disclose more than less. Because when I get information from the Office of Disabilities saying, so-and-so has requested accommodations for the semester, this is what they need. Then I will reach out sometimes to the student and say, I received this letter. Is there anything else? Like, and talk about it with them, because I think it's really important for me as the professor to know, what do I need to give you or provide to you to help you succeed in this class? Some people might think you have, mean professors out there who just want to fail people. Generally, no. If you went into this position or this career because you like teaching, you really want to see your students succeed. So I really make a point to try to get to know my students and get to know what their needs are, and what other things they need. The majority of my students in our program is virtual even before COVID. So some of the accommodations are like extended time, or, you know, now because we do a lot on computers, anyway, it's just making documents accessible. So rather than PDFs, give them Word documents or real text files, and things like that. But I think, you know, especially as a freshman, you might be nervous about you're probably nervous about college anyway, but then nervous about, you know, making a good impression or even just talking to the professor. But really, you know, it's only for you to help you succeed. So I really I appreciate it when my students take the time to write me a long email about themselves. Like, don't ever think that like, oh, I'm like making this worse for my professor because I'm sending them this entire email. No, like, I like to know about you. I like to learn, you know, what you need in order to succeed in my class. And I think out, you know, just encourage the students to.
So you're saying that like the letters from the office are good, but you, as a professor, you really appreciate that one-on-one communication and time from your students.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. So going back kind of to our jobs, our advice on job searching, what advice would our panel have for disclosing your vision in a professional situation such as a job interview? And I'll kind of start out with this. During my undergraduate, I did several job interviews, and this was back pre-COVID time. So one thing I would always do is I had a couple of really good friends, and you would usually have these interviews in a professor's office because it was for a research lab, but usually it was like a professor that I didn't have for class or something. So we would actually go practice the physical route like to their office, so that the day of the interview, I wasn't trying to find like this office in a basement, like back in the corner on this weird part of the hallway. So for me, practicing the physical route was pretty important, like especially since a lot of the positions I was looking for were on my college campus. But I was wondering, what kind of other suggestions do our panelists have in terms of disclosing your low vision and prepping for job interviews? Sam, I think you had
I will. Yeah, I'll cover that. Yeah, I think it's, especially during, you know, this uncertain time of the pandemic, I think it's important to prep the technical parts before, you know, you sign on to, you know, that Zoom or whatever platform you use, Google Hello or something. I think it's important to go through the drill of not only the questions, but, you know, signing on with a friend and, you know, making sure that everything's in check, such as the camera angle, the microphone's working, and like your outfit you're gonna wear, whether, you know, it's you want to just have all those things in order. In addition to like prepping for the questions, it's sort of like, you know, going through the virtual tour of before the actual interview, so that you want to have a very solid impression, especially through this very awkward platform. So, yeah.
I'll just add a tiny thing. Like, I was not comfortable on Zoom, like on the video like I am now a couple months ago, but I had a class online via Zoom, and, you know, we're joining more webinars, we're doing this. So this isn't going away. So I think we can all, it's safe to say we should all get really comfortable on camera and talking into our computers, into that little light on our screen, because it's not going anywhere. And I know that with practice, you just get more comfortable, because I was not comfortable a couple months ago, but I'm much more comfortable now. So I just think it's good to practice.
Mm-hmm. And I know one thing that our panelists wanted to remind everyone of is that if you are low vision or blind, when you do go for a job interview, one thing to remind everyone about is that the interviewer cannot ask you about your vision. So you need to be the person to choose if it is appropriate to disclose or not during that interview process. But remember, you are in control when it comes to disclosing your vision during a job interview.
Maureen, can I just add something too? This is Emily.
Of course, Emily.
That is also true in academia. As a professor, if I know that my student is enrolling in another class that my colleague is teaching, I legally cannot say to my colleague, hey, so-and-so's in your class, they have a visual impairment. It's the responsibility of the student to be able to go directly to that professor and say it to them as well. So that same liability crosses over in academia as well.
Correct. And I would also add that even when the interviewer does bring it up, I think it's best to give some grace and to because you want that job, and you want to demonstrate that, hey, you're right. I have this cane, or I'm looking too close at whatever you're handing me. But my competency and skills and my skills to adapt to any environment or any task given to me, you want to demonstrate that with things that with the activities or accomplishments that you have achieved up to that point, and either pointing to the resume or saying, hey, it doesn't, whether or not I'm visually impaired is irrelevant, and you just want to demonstrate that if it is brought up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So speaking of that, kind of, if you've had conversations like that, have you ever had to take control of a conversation about low vision, or potentially change the subject? And if so, how did you do that? Or if that happens, how do you approach that situation?
This is Emily. I will say it's something I think that maybe this isn't necessarily advice for how to do it, but just like knowing that it comes with practice. And in the beginning, it might be tough and you might feel awkward and you might be awkward. When I first started so I never used a cane growing up, and I only learned about them when I went into graduate school. So within the last 5 years, have started learning how to use a cane. And I was out with friends from high school who I hadn't seen, this is a few years ago, in quite a long time, and we went out for ice cream. So I met everybody and took my cane out, and we were walking, and everyone was like, whoa, are you blind now? Like, when did you start using a cane? And my first response, my gut response, was like very mean and just kind of rude, kind of like punching it back at them, because I was really offended and really didn't know what to say. So I'm like, no, I'm not. But like, it was awkward, and I think about that a lot because these are my best friends, but I didn't know how to approach it. But now over time, it's gotten a lot easier to say, to explain it to people. So just know that it's something that, like, as you keep doing it, it gets easier. But the first time was really awkward and painful for sure.
Yeah, this is something I'm working on too, Emily, is approaching tough conversations with, what am I saying? Without emotions. So just like really thinking and taking your time I sometimes will jump into a response because I feel like it's necessary and I'm like all fired up or feeling overly emotional, but just like taking a step back and really thinking. My fiance's did a lot of neuroscience, and so he tells me about the hot and the cool system. So we need to access our cool system and just be like, just approach every awkward conversation or difficult conversation with professionalism and take your time. There's no rush. And so that's just my basic advice for if it's discussing your visual impairment in a situation that's difficult, or just any professional setting. I think that's just a good way to do it.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Sam, do you have any advice? Have you ever had to talk about like your low vision or like change the topic of conversation?
Yeah, and I'd say
goal of a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think when people start talking about my, you know, low vision and my visual impairment, it can get draining, right? It can, like, it's not necessarily that I'm always offended by it, but like they sort of talk about it like I'm sort of some sort of weird freak. And so I like to redirect a conversation by, you know, talking about them, just saying, you know, yes, you know, this is part of my reality. This is, but like, you know, what are struggles you have, or like, what do you like to do, or like getting a conversation off me. And
that's really
you know,
good.
and,
I like that a lot.
And you know, saying, you know, because in most parts people are kind of fascinated by it, and overly fascinated in it. You know, again, it gets too much, and I want the attention off me, and that usually does the trick, because, you know, people move on very quickly, and they remember next time when I'm walking down the hall and I don't say hello. I don't recognize them, and then they realize I'm not snubbing them or anything. So yeah, it's I find that to be a helpful tactic.
That's so funny.
You bring
that
up
happens to me all the time.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, you bring up a good point about the, like, just answering their question. That reminds me of just like little kids being an educator, and like little kids will always, you know, want to know things, but the response is only answer what they're asking. No need to go into this full-on explanation of eye anatomy and how albinism occurred and all of that, you know? You just say, like, this is how it is, and then they'll be like, oh, okay, and then they move on to whatever. So, like, sometimes I think we overthink this, being the people with low vision, that, like, really maybe all they need is a really short, simple answer, but we're just so, like, consumed with all the information we know that we feel like they need to know it too.
Or sometimes, I know for me, like, people approach it with sometimes, like, they don't mean to, but with pity, like, oh gosh, I can't imagine a life without a car. And then I'm like, oh, well, I never have to pay gas or car insurance. Like, so honestly, like, my Uber budget for the month is basically the same thing. And then they're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. And then, like, we move on. Or, like, if my friends drive me somewhere, like, I usually treat to coffee or lunch. So it's not like there aren't ways that we adapt and work around things, right? But I always try to just be like, I don't know, sometimes humor, or like I have students, sometimes will be like, man, I'm as blind as a bat. I can't see that thing. And I'm like, oh, hey, me too. And then they're like, oh, I'm sorry. But yeah. So I think there's a couple ways to approach it. I know my preferred way is like humor, or, you know, just stating how I accomplish things. But I think that pretty much has all the questions that we have. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Katie to help moderate for our questions from our audience.
Great. I'm going to actually turn that over to Abigail.
Abigail? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was trying to remember my unmute button. So we do have some questions in the chat, and I know there's at least one person who already has their hand raised. So I'm going to read out some of the questions in the chat. If other people would like to pose their own questions, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 if you're calling in, Alt-Y if you're on a computer, or Option Y if you're on a Mac. And we had one attendee, Vanessa, I think it is, who wanted to see how you all have kind of come to accepting your blindness or your low vision. The student or attendee was saying how for a long time she had been trying to fit in with the sighted world until recently. So kind of how have each of you, maybe just a little bit about your acceptance of your low vision?
I can go first. I think for me, I always knew that I was not sighted. like fully sighted. I mean, my mom did a great job of like showing me the miracle worker when I was 5 years old, like really trying to educate me about it. But then there were times where I was like, okay, I'm watching the miracle worker, this is a great movie, but I'm not blind like Helen Keller, like I can see. And so I never identified with being blind. And I always said that I was visually impaired, but I hated that word, that phrase, because I'm like, I'm not impaired. Like I can do a lot of things that my peers can do who have full 20/20 vision. And then it wasn't until I like graduate school where I learned the word low vision, and really recognized like, wow, people are like, there are programs about this. This is low vision therapy. Like I have low vision, and a lot of people in the world do too. And I've had to even educate some of my colleagues who are, you know, of retirement age in the field, who maybe been in the field for a long time and haven't continued education. And I had one colleague who called people with low vision partials, like partially sighted. And I was like, oh my goodness, like it felt like mudblood. Any Harry Potter fans out there? Like it was just, I felt so offended, but I had to take the time to educate him and explain to him like, this is not okay. This is the proper term now that people are using to identify with not having full complete vision. So Vanessa, it's kind of taken me a little while to evolve around the term low vision. And I had to play around with, you know, different ones that I felt comfortable using. But I think also just doing a little research on my own and connecting with groups like this and meeting people who have low vision, who don't connect, you know, with the term blindness, you know, or being blind, but knowing that, you know, yes, I use a cane, which is a stereotypical image of somebody who's blind, but I'm not blind. I have low vision. So, you know, it's something to kind of try on, you know, try it on and just play around with it. Play around with describing it to people, to your friends, to your family, and see how it feels.
If I could jump in just to kind of add to that, you know, at the College Success Program, one of the things that we have is our mentors, which all of the panelists we have today are mentors. And I think that's a situation where that would be a great thing to talk through with a mentor. It's a great thing to, you know, when we connect with students with our mentors, we try to align them with things like, you know, where is your vision loss? What is it? You know, like, so that we have people that would be similar to, and maybe even the same type of vision loss that you would have. And you can always talk to them about, how did you handle it? What did you do? You know, just to kind of get that advice from that angle. So just throwing that out there, that's always an option as well.
I was gonna say, I know for me, I was rebellious all like K through 12, even though my mom was a TVI. So I couldn't get away with anything. But I was still rebellious. I like had phases where I would write in really tiny handwriting, or like try not to wear my sunglasses outside or things like that, because I wanted to be like everyone else. But then I think the best thing I did was I went away for college, away from home, and I realized that I wasn't bound to the pre-social constructs of high school and being part of the special education department. I had the ability to reach out to the professors on my own and reach out to peer groups on my own. And going to college was the best thing that could happen to me, because it allowed me to define my vision within my constructs. And then I also started making connections with other college age kids who were legally blind or low vision. And I think that for me is where I really started to settle into like how my vision, because my vision is part of my identity. Right? It's as much part of me as I am like a woman or a cat owner or a daughter or a sister. But I didn't really accept that until I left home for college.
Awesome, thanks. We do have someone who's calling in with the area code 651 who has their hand raised. So if you want to unmute, *6 should unmute, and you're welcome to share your question. I'm not currently able to unmute you, so caller.
Oh, right, all right.
Oh, there you are, great.
Yeah. So I guess my question is redundant now, since I wanted to ask it earlier, but, you know, I was kind of stressing out that my mom signed me up for some low vision stuff since I am completely blind, so I was confused. But I'm glad I sticked around because I actually learned some useful stuff.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we did want to create this webinar to specifically address the experiences of those with low vision, but I would completely agree with you as someone who does identify as blind that we still have a lot to gain from one another. So I'm glad you stuck it through it, even though Mom signed you up without you knowing. So I'm going to move to Melanie posted a question in the chat about she's a high school student and she's in the process of applying to college. And she wanted to know if disclosing her visual impairment in her essays, if our panelists think that that could be a hindrance to her admission into college.
Brilynn, I think you're muted.
Whoops. Okay, sorry. I wrote about my visual impairment in my essays. It was a big part of them. So I think if it's something that would probably make you really unique and highlight what you have accomplished despite your low vision or vision impairment, whatever. I really do like the term low vision now versus visually impaired. I'm gonna stick with that. I've always just said I'm visually impaired, but I like low vision, so I'm keeping it. But anyway, I highly recommend writing about it. And yeah, stand by it. It's part of who you are, and you know, be proud of it because it makes you you and it makes you unique. So I wrote a ton of essays, and it was in all of them. So
this is Kristen from the CSP. I had a teacher. I did not want to write about it as a high school student and being blind, and I had a teacher who was like, "You absolutely need to write about this in every single paper. You know, those people who do not know you will be so impressed." Because everything that you accomplished, like, is fine in itself, but like with a disability, they will not know what to think because they will most likely not have a disability. So you must write about it like you know, she couldn't make me, but she was very adamant, and I did. And I think that was a good thing, but I also can appreciate, because I remember being in high school and not wanting to mention it at all.
Yeah, I think that both Brilynn and Kristen, I think that, like, you know, Melanie, like, you're at the age where you're still learning about yourself, and I don't feel like I really identified with all of my, you know, labels and knew who I was until I hit my mid-20s. And so I feel like I'm trying to remember back to my admissions essays, and I think I might have mentioned it like very briefly, but nowhere near as in depth maybe as Brilynn had. But I think you need to maybe sit down and just like ask yourself, why do I want people to know about it? You know, why do I want to write about it in my admissions essays? Like, really think about how much do you identify with it? How much is it a part of your life? And why would you want college admissions officers to know about your low vision? So, like, sit with it. I know it's a weird thing to just say, like, sit with the thought, but like, I don't know, it took me a long time to kind of like put together my admissions essays, and I did so many of them. And maybe try writing one where you talk all about it, and then try writing one where you don't talk about it at all, and see which one feels the most like you.
Great. So I think we have time for one more question from Jillian, who has her hand raised. If you want to unmute, Jillian.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so my mom is sitting with me right now. She actually has the question, so.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jillian. So my impression, so Jillian's a freshman. My impression was
Freshman in college. So.
In college, yes. So my impression was that the admissions people, or maybe college in general, they're looking for that diversity. And so people were very welcoming and interested, and that makes you unique and want to stand out. And, you know, Jillian did choose to write about her disability, or maybe that's not what you say anymore. Sorry, her low vision. But my question is more about jobs. You know, do employers have that perspective that we want diverse people in the workforce, or do they feel? I mean, the truth is that you know, Jillian does need extended time to finish or accomplish certain tasks, but then again, you know, she does them in her own way. Do employers have, I don't know, a bias against that? I mean, what have you all felt so far when it comes to employers?
I've personally, in my experience, at least within the sciences, they're really pushing for diversity. But I've always told myself that although it's good to have diversity, I want to be hired for my skill set, not to fill a diversity quota, if that makes sense.
Agreed. Yeah, I think no, that's a great point, Maureen. And I think the way to show, you know, and really highlight your talents, I don't know if this is still a thing because I haven't interviewed for a job in like 6 years, but putting together a portfolio, you know, of your work that you've done, show people what you can do before it even, you know, comes up that maybe I need Zoom text to help me, you know, get this done, or might take me a little bit longer to complete this report that has to go out at the end of the month or something like that. But show them all the things that you can do and that you're really great at, and get letters of recommendation from professors and externships and things like that.
I also find like sharing your technology is really fun, like your talking iPhone or like the Braille keyboard, because people have never seen it before. And so they think, whoa, she's typing without using her eyes. That's so cool. And so sometimes technology can be a great segue to show people how you can accomplish a task.
Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say don't apply for something, or apply for something because you're interested, not, you know, questioning whether or not they need to fill a diversity quota, as you said, Maureen.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they're going to put your resume through like some kind of scanner to scan keywords. So they're not even going to see that you have low vision or any kind of visual impairment. They're just going to see all of your accomplishments on your resume. So just build that resume as much as you can and apply to stuff online.
And if your university has a career center, you can check out your resume with the career center and get their help as well. I did that. It was great.
Biggest regret of my life is not being at the career center like every couple weeks, taking advantage of tips and tricks on how to really highlight your skills on a resume and doing practice interviews. I actually did one, I think maybe it was with Learning Ally, but they're tricky and hard if you haven't practiced. So doing a couple practice interviews, because those are all like equally as important, your resume and your interview, than like, you know, anything else. Just making that good first impression. They're going to have faith in your ability and they're going to be confident. So you just want to make them feel like you're the one for the job, and they're not even going to, hopefully not even think about your vision.
Great feedback from everybody. Well, thank you all of our panelists and Maureen for facilitating. If anyone has more questions about the College Success Program, Katie, what are the best ways for them to reach us?
Yeah, sure. So the best way is probably you could email us. It's just csp@learningally.org. We also are on Facebook and Twitter, so you can just search for Learning Ally on there. We're kind of separate from the Learning Ally Facebook pages that are more geared towards K-12, dyslexia, audiobook type of things. So look for Learning Ally Blind Visually Impaired Community on there. You can go to our website, learningally.org/college success. You can also find all of our stuff there. And I believe Abigail put her email address in the chat. Don't bombard her, but she will respond to you if you reach out, or she'll send you to me and you can bombard me. But yeah, so CSP at learningally.org is probably, if you have direct questions, you can send them right to us there.
And if you want an awesome mentor like one of us, I think we're all pretty cool. So
I will say too, Brilynn
Definitely.
mentioned job interview, kind of practice, mock interview stuff. That's also something that we do within the College Success Program. So if you're interested in getting practice with those things, you can join the program for free, and we can get you connected on those things as well.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Real quick, we are at our hour.
How do you become a mentor for the College Success?
We are already set with mentors for this year, but for those who are interested, they can email me at afshaw, S-H-A-W, at learningally.org. Mentors need to identify as blind or low vision, have completed their bachelor's degree, and be someone that is comfortable meeting with other students about being in college and blind. But you're welcome to email me for more details.
All right, thank you so much.
And thank you everybody for attending. This will go up on our YouTube channel, and you can see the rest of our webinars there as well. Take care and have a good evening.
bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.